If you're still planning on gardening in 2026 like you have every other year, then you gotta stop and watch this first. And how is this video gonna be any different from all the other gardening videos on YouTube? Well, I'm gonna tell you, we're talking today about systems. We are not just talking about tips and tricks, systems that you can implement in your garden to make the yields and the success way higher than you've ever had before. And there's more than one system. You should have a system in place for extreme weather, for water, for soil, and for nutrients. System one, we're gonna talk about plant protection in extreme weather. When you don't do it the right way, this is what ends up resulting. Poor mango. But why did this mango do so well only about 50 feet away? It wasn't because I knew something special about mangoes. It was because this tree was part of a system. So we chose to use a lighting system to protect these tropical trees. That's right, we chose Christmas lights. And be sure to use incandescent if you're gonna go this route, as incandescent generates the heat. LEDs will not generate heat. Of course, then wrapping the canopy in a bed sheet and plastic will hold the heat in during the cold. And be sure to take the covers off during the day. You don't want to fry the plants during the daytime sun. But you can see how effective this was on our small sapodilla. It looks fantastic. Now let's show you the trees that we did not cover as an experiment on purpose. Woo! This avocado is toast. Probably entirely dead. It was not wrapped in Christmas lights or plastic. It was simply left out to the 24 degrees low that it hit this winter. Now that's all fine for cold, but heat is just as important to protect against. What we use at our nursery, we use shade cloth. If you have too hot of temperatures, you must protect your plants with shade cloth or else they are going to get torched. Now if you're in northern states, it may not be quite as important, but us in central Florida, we have some extreme heat, some extreme weather. It might be fine for fruit trees, but for vegetables, look out. These shade cloths come in different percentages. This one we use on our greenhouse is a 50% shade cloth. You can use anywhere from 30% to 70%. 50, 60, 70% of course will get you more shade, but it'll also reduce photosynthesis. So I'd say 30 to 50% would be your ideal range. System number two, water. Water is probably the most important system that you can plan for in your garden this year. And I'm not talking about just an irrigation system. I'm talking about the right kind. Well, what is the right kind? Well, I'll tell you. It is rainwater. If you can capture rainwater, you will be so far ahead of every other year that you've gardened before. Here in my greenhouse, what we do is we built a pond system into the greenhouse where water actually falls in the outside of the greenhouse, travels along here, finds a low point, and then falls into these barrels just by itself, just by gravity. You can even start small. If you don't have a big system to collect rainwater, start with a 5-gallon bucket. What I do is I actually set the bucket right outside the greenhouse, water rolls off of here and spills right into the bucket. And rainwater has the perfect pH for your plants. Nature already knows it has it taken care of. Most plants want to be between 6.0 and 6.5 on the pH scale. And yes, of course, there are exceptions to that, like blueberries and jabotacaba and azaleas and rhododendrons. They want to be a lot more acidic. And there's some plants that want to be a little more alkaline. But general rule of thumb is keep between 6.0 and 6.5 on the pH scale, and your plants are going to be super happy. But Pete, I can't collect enough rainwater for all of my plants. What else should I do? I need to use my well, or I need to use my tap water in order to water all my plants. Well, I have a solution for you. As a workaround, we can take the water that is available to us and treat it organically, naturally, without using chemicals. Tap water is generally neutral, around 7.0, and so we want to bring that down a little bit. And many times, well water is also too alkaline, too high. My well is 7.6, which is way too high for my plants. So how do I naturally bring the water down? The first great option is to use Canadian peat moss. This is perfect for lowering pH. It works super effectively. You see, we have some here. We're gonna take some and we're gonna put it into our water bucket. Go ahead and fill your bucket up with water and leave it for a few days. But how do we measure what the pH is or know if it dropped too low with the peat moss method? Well, you wanna be testing it. What we use is this Hana Combo, which is a digital water tester, or a little bit of a cheaper option is you can use this pond test kit by API and actually just use a drop method. You have your drops, you follow the instructions, and then you match it up to the colors on the test sheet. Now, as I mentioned, my well is super alkaline. It's about 7.6 the last time I tested it. So I'm going to show you another method in order to lower the pH if you don't have peat moss on you. So we can naturally lower water's pH using citrus fruits. We can use citric acid and lower the pH that way. I actually buy some citric acid and do some experimentation that way, even though my pH is proper. Or you can use a white vinegar. A lot of people have this in their house. When you use this stuff, make sure very, very small small amounts and use gloves and protective eyewear. And we're really aiming for this ideal range, as you see here, between 6.0 and 6.5 pH. So why all this fuss about pH? Well, it has to do with the plant's ability to uptake nutrients. At the wrong pH, the plant's roots aren't able to uptake nutrients properly, either too acidic or too alkaline. So this soil becomes super nutrient rich when the water's at the correct pH. So in essence, it's almost like adding fertilizer to your plants, but in reality, you're really just unlocking the nutrients that are already present in the soil that may not have been able to be uptaken before. So of course, we pick the right plants for our climate, and then after that we make sure that we have the correct water system in place. Just like I illustrated here before, this is one of the most important things that you can do before even considering soil or nutrients. The next system we have to focus on is, yes, soil. Soil is super important. It's everything to the plant once water is present. Now, where I'm at in Central Florida, we have really rough soils for plants that we're trying to grow that are edible. Maybe it's okay for native plants being very sandy. It's going to drain very quickly. It's not going to hold lots of organic matter. And you can see it's just not very rich. It kind of looks like dirt, not soil. So how do we create the correct soil for our gardens? Let's go over it. So there are two systems that we have in place here out at my nursery and homestead. The first one, we're going to focus on compost. As you can see behind me, I've done some training with Dr. Elaine Ingham and the Soil Food Web, and we turn our waste into soil. How do we do that? That'll be a whole nother video that we'll go on in depth about. But right now, to keep it very simple, what we do is we use our weeds and we use our kitchen scraps. Anything that's in the green sector, we use that combined with browns such as mulch or hay, things like that. And then we use water as well. We have to have a correct balance of those three. I like to use 30% green, 60% brown, and then 10%, the last 10%, would be a high nitrogen source, something like manure. Now, if you have, let's say, animals like goats or rabbits, you can use that manure straight on your plants. It is what is considered a cool or a cold compost. But if you have animals like horses, cows, things like that, chickens, that is a hot manure, and you cannot put that straight on plants without composting it first. You have to rise the temperature in a thermophilic way with your compost. That's why we use a thermometer here to make sure the temperature gets high enough. It has to be over 130 degrees, technically for 10 days. If it gets higher than that, like 140 or 150, then you can do 3-4 days like that. And then you turn it once it gets up to the correct temperature and holds for a few days, you turn it. And so you maybe have 2 or 3 turns, and you can make compost in 30 to 45 days. You can have finished compost. Let's look at what it looks like. So on the surface, it's just going to look a little bit like mulch right now. But if we dig into it, you're going to start to see the richness of this soil. I have not touched the soil in months, and it is so moist and beautiful. This is exactly what we're looking for in order to grow the best productive edible plants out there. This is the soil we're looking for, and not this. Well, what's so special about this soil? Well, we have, first of all, a lot of retention of moisture, which we know the plant roots need. There is no uptake of nutrients whatsoever if there's not water present. There could be all the nutrients present in the soil, but if it's bone dry, the plant will die. So we have, number one, moisture retention. Number two, we have high organic matter. That organic matter has to do with something called CEC, cation exchange capacity, the ability for the soil to hold nutrients and not have those nutrients just leach right through. So this is going to have high cation exchange capacity. It's going to have very good nutrient retention in it. And it's also going to have good levels of oxygen as well. You can see, even though it is moist, it is not too saturated. It is holding its form, but I can easily break it apart. It's going to have the correct amount of oxygen as well. So we have a balance in here of a little bit of sand. You can see some particles here. We have organic matter, high nitrogen, high nutrients, and we have moisture. That is what you need. Those are the keys to good soil. The last part, and possibly the most important part to this type of thermophilic compost, is it's going to have super high microbial life. What does that mean? That means the bacteria, fungi, nematodes, and protozoa levels in this soil is going to be super high. What does that do? Well, those are the organisms that cycle nutrients for plants and make nutrients become plant available. Well, how does it do that? It does that pretty simply. The bacteria and the organisms eat each other, and they also eat organic matter, and then they poop out what they don't need. And that excrement is actually plant available nutrients. If it has not been converted by some sort of microbe, it will not be available to the plant. This is why it's absolutely critical to have microbes present in your soil in the correct populations and percentages. This is why most people just want to buy bags of fertilizer, because it's much easier. They don't have to worry about it. The bagged fertilizer does bypass the need for microbes. However, and you say, well, why do we need microbes then? However, the problem is when we use too much bagged fertilizer, it ends up killing the microbes in the soil, which means you need more fertilizer the next time. Now, of course, not every single thing in a bag is bad. We buy some worm tea in this container. We also buy blood meal and bone meal to apply that if there's ever any deficiencies that we need to supplement. So not everything in a bag is horrible, but when it's synthetic fertilizer, you're playing a dangerous game of destroying your soil. The second soil system we use is, that's right, worms. Worms might be one of the best things you can add to your soil. So you either have worms that are added in your soil beds, or you can actually make your own worm bin, raise the worms yourself, and then harvest the worm castings, which are the worm poop, which has all the benefits in it. But what do we do to feed these worms? Well, feeding them is pretty easy when you have the correct system in place. Well, what's the correct system? Enter kiwi and coconut. We have these goats on our property. Really, they're pets and they're friends, but my reason is to harvest their scat. Yes, they're cute and cuddly as well, but they're providing a function here. The goat scat is perfect food for the worms, and they will transform that into the best type of soil possible for absolutely free. When you say, well, what do you feed your goats? We feed them the weeds and any of the plants out here that they're allowed to eat that we don't need or that are scraps. The worms will transform this in a matter of days into this beautiful soil. Look at this. It doesn't get much better than this. And most worm farms do use manure as their food source since it's super sustainable and it's a waste product. At Sweet Orchard, we focus on regenerative systems, which is going to bring us back full circle to our last system in nutrients. And no, we're not finished with the worms just yet. So much of that worm's function is to create the best soil for us, but there's still another usage for them. A small portion of these worms are actually used as food source themselves to feed the fish in our pond, which is located in our greenhouse. As you might remember from being a child wanting to fish in the lake, using worms for fish is absolutely awesome. The protein in their bodies is super beneficial for the fish. So the fish eat the worms and then they produce waste themselves. The waste is in the form of ammonium, which plants cannot use. But in our pond, we have created a bog system. This first barrel is a bog, and up here we have a bog as well. What happens in the bog? There's lots of beneficial bacteria. Those bacteria actually cling on and transform the waste by eating the waste, transforming it into nitrite and then into nitrate. Nitrate being a usable form for plants, the usable form of nitrogen. And we have a pump in our last barrel. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 barrels in this pond system. Water goes from the pump and is transferred up to the highest barrel in the back. Water then transfers down through gravity to each barrel and then flows back to the last barrel, cycling back and forth. It's being cleaned by the bog. The bog is transforming the ammonium into nitrate. That nitrate-rich water is what we use to water the plants in our greenhouse. So first choosing the right plants, then protecting them from the heat and cold, developing a water system, developing a soil system, and a nutrient system that is optimally regenerative in nature would be the best way to design your 2026 garden completely different than you've done in the past years. And this will pay dividends down the road even further. There's a little bit of cost to set up. Yes, you have to buy a little bit of worms to start, but you can get this done really inexpensive. And then you won't have to buy fertilizer and you'll have the richest soil, the healthiest plants ever. And yes, I realize I have a greenhouse, I have machines, I have a nursery, and you may not have all of that stuff, and you don't need all of that. I just happen to be in the business, and this is what I do for a living. You can simplify all of these systems to work for you on your homestead. So I hope this helped your planning for 2026. If you have further questions, let me know down in the comments below. Happy gardening, and I'll see you in the next one.